So does Mualani even have good teammates? In this video, we're just going to be discussing some of her best teams and teammates in general, at least in this stage of the game right now, and hopefully we're going to make some of the best teams that you can utilize her in, again, for the current state of the game. So yeah, let's begin. Alright, so first of all, if we're talking about the perfect Mualani team, it would technically be a Vaporize team on paper, because she's going to be an on-field Hydra DPS. Vaporize, or technically like reverse Vaporize, since she deals like good hits, you'd want to just Vaporize these hits, and that's just gonna multiply your damage. The problem with that is that you'd want to make sure that Mualani is gonna be the one vaping, and for that you're gonna need a pyro enabler. If we talk about pyro enablers, usually Xiangling is gonna be the option that comes to mind first, because she's pretty much the only like fully reliable pyro enabler we have right now, and she works in like most Vaporize teams. The problem with that though, she doesn't have like good synergy with Mualani, and that's not because of the two of them, it's mainly because of Bennett. We all know that Xiangling and Bennett have some of the best synergies in the game, and usually you just want to play them together. Xiangling without Bennett is just going to be nowhere near as good as Xiangling with Bennett. But the problem is, if you're using Bennett on your team, in that case you just want to, obviously you'd want him to benefit your full team. The problem with that is that Mualani cannot benefit from Bennett. All of his buffs, the attack buffs, she doesn't really need any of them because she scales with HP. So Bennett is going to be completely useless for Mualani, and using a character only to buff Xiangling is not going to be good. And if you're not using Bennett, then using Xiangling is just not going to be worth it. It's technically usable, you can just use her as like a pyro enabler, but that's just like simply wasting both their potentials. I mean, it's going to work and you're probably going to be able to clear with them, but this is not the optimal team, because you're either wasting Mualani's potential by not playing like an actual support with her on the team, or you're wasting Xiangling's huge potential by not playing Bennett with her. It's either one of the two, which in my opinion ruins their synergy a lot for me. So I wouldn't really recommend playing them both together, although you technically can. You have other options though, like Daya and Thoma. They're gonna be decent pyro enablers, but they're not gonna be enough for sure. Daya's gonna be kind of clunky, and Thoma is just not gonna be applying enough pyro, simply. Especially because in Vaporize teams, you're gonna need a lot of pyro to keep that aura going, so they're not gonna be enough. Although they're gonna be like decent, but definitely not 100% the best options. So yeah, with knowing that, just for a Vaporize team, obviously you'd want Mualani, and then you'd want a pyro enabler. As I said, the only technical 3 options we have right now are gonna be either Xiangling, Daya, or Thoma. Xiangling is still gonna work, but I explained before why I wouldn't recommend playing her with Mualani. And with Thoma and Daya, they're gonna be decent options. They're also gonna be decent sustain options, because Daya is gonna mitigate your damage and Thoma is gonna give you the shield, so it's pretty decent. Your third option is obviously gonna be the Nemo with the Viridescence. You'd want to swirl Hydra with them so you can buff your Mualani. It's gonna give you that resistance shred, which is pretty good. Best options for that is obviously gonna be either Kazuha for also the damage bonus and stuff like that, or Sucrose is also gonna be pretty good for the elemental mastery, so either of them are gonna be pretty good. And then finally, for the last slot, it's gonna be a huge range. It's simply just gonna be a flex. You'd probably want to shield her if you're not playing her with Daya, because for that like resistance to interruption and stuff like that. So you can play like Zhongli or Karara, for example, or whatever, or you can use the second Hydra like Candace, for example, for the resonance and also for the normal attacks damage buffs. You can use like Xingqiu for the resistance shred. Any second Hydra is gonna do the job, or you can use just a simple buffer, for example Yunjin for her normal attacks. She's gonna give you a lot of extra damage, or you can use like Kishina, even though she's not really like a great support on herself, but you could use the new set with her, and that's gonna give you a huge amount of damage bonus, which obviously Mualani is gonna like. But yeah, it's pretty much just a flex spot. You can use whatever you need. The main core of the team is just gonna be Mualani, a pyro, and then a Viridescent user. That's pretty much it. So this is gonna be your base Vaporize team. Unless you're using Xiangling in that team specifically, the pyro is not gonna be enough, especially with Thoma and Daya, because you're gonna need a lot of pyro, and first of all, they don't apply just enough pyro, and second of all, you're not gonna be proccing them as much, especially with Daya. It's gonna be a very clunky gameplay, and with this type of team, you usually won't be able to Vaporize all of your hits, that's for sure. You can Vaporize some of them, but definitely not all of them. A workaround around that is gonna be including a burn-in team too. So instead of only Vape, you'd want to play her in a Vape burn team. How you do that, you just want to include a Dendro enabler on your team, so you're gonna be burning enemies too, and that's gonna leave a lot of like Hydra aura on them, and that's gonna allow Mualani to Vaporize all of her hits, because the pyro application in general is gonna be much more than the Hydra application from Mualani. So every time you just hit with Mualani, she's gonna be able to Vaporize. So it's gonna be almost the same Vaporize team, but usually you'd want to replace the Anemo. I might ask why the Anemo, because they're not gonna matter as much anymore. If you're leaving consistent pyro aura on enemies, which is the point of even having burn on your team, that means the Anemos are usually gonna swirl pyro instead of Hydro. Dendro. So they're not going to be buffing your Mualani at all. And obviously that's going to make them pretty much just useless and you don't want to have them on the team. So instead of replacing the flex with the Dendro enabler, you probably just want to replace the Anemos themselves and leave the flex. So yeah, you just want to replace the Anemos with the Dendro enabler. The best we have right now is obviously Emily, especially for a burn team. That's like pretty much all of her kit is made for. So if you have her and you want to play her with Mualani, then go for it. In a burn team, she's going to be the best. The only other option I would say is probably Nahida. She's going to be the only one able to apply enough Dendro for burn. And obviously her buffs are going to be super good for Mualani and everyone on the team. But yeah, other than that, for the rest of the Dendro characters, I don't really think any of them is going to be able to apply enough Dendro for burn. So unfortunately, those are going to be your only options if you want to play her in a Vaporize burn team. For the flex slot, it's going to be less flexible, I would say, in a burn vape team, because usually you'd want a shielder, I would say, is probably going to be the better option, especially in like burn-in, because you're also going to be taking damage from the burn-in. Or you can use a healer, for example, like Sijuin or whatever, but mainly I would say a shielder like Zhongli is going to be your better option. So yeah, I'd say just probably use Zhongli or another situational character. For example, if you're using like Dea as a pyro enabler, Kashina's going to proc her skill much better and so on. So yeah, mainly just use Zhongli unless you need another character, then go for it. But yeah, in this team, Mualani is not going to suffer from wasting any hits. All of her hits are going to be vaporized and they're going to deal multiplied damage. It's going to be a little clunky, obviously, but it's going to work pretty well and you're going to vaporize all of your hits. Now, the final type of teams that you can play Mualani in, and personally my favorite just because I don't really like headaches. Because as you guys saw, the Vaporize teams have their own problems. There's just like not enough pyro going around and stuff like that. And then the burning teams have their own problems. So even though you technically want to play her with pyro for her to vaporize, it's not really necessary, especially for the teams you have right now. So the last type of teams and my favorite is just going to be simply a double hydro team. You don't want to vaporize her hits anymore. Because also when you take into account all of these teams are going to be clunky, especially like when actually using them. So the final damage is not even going to be that much worse for like double hydro teams, especially if you have good hydros on your characters that you can use. It's going to be much better and easier to just play her in the double hydro team. And I think that's what I'm going to personally do. But yeah, in the double hydro team, you just want to play Mualani and then a second hydro. The best one is obviously going to be just Fiorina. She's just going to be giving you tons of damage bonus and that's going to be pretty good. Or you can play any other hydro, for example, Yellen, Xingqiu, whatever. But Fiorina is going to be the best option because she's going to be buffing your Mualani by a lot. In this type of team, you definitely want to include a Verdescent user because the Hydro is the only thing going around, so you're going to be able to swirl it very easily. And when you swirl it, you're going to gain all of the Verdescent buffs. So yeah, you definitely want to include either Kaza or Sucrose or any Verdescent user really, because in this team, you don't really need Elemental Mastery. So any Verdescent user is going to work. Pretty much any Nemo. And then finally, you just want to flex. Either you can use another Hydro, you can use a shielder. If you're using Fiorina, you probably just want to use a healer for you to gain her stacks. So if you're using like someone like Sijuin, it's probably going to be the best option. But any healer is going to work, like Kokomi, whatever. Any healer is going to be able to work. Or yeah, if you're not using Fiorina, then you can use any flex, like a second Hydro or a shielder or whatever. The main core of the team is just going to be like Mualani and then another Hydro, and then just make sure you use a Verdescent to buff her, and that's it. That's going to be a very simple team. So yeah, the double Hydro is going to be a very simple and easy to use team. I would personally recommend it, at least in the state of the game right now, until maybe we're going to have better pyro enablers in the future that are going to synergize much better with Mualani. But right now we don't, and the rest of like the Vaporize or Vaporize burn-in teams are going to be very clunky, and they're definitely not going to be optimal. She's not going to be taking full advantage out of them anyways. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Let me know which teams are going to be using your Mualani in. Doesn't need to be meta, just slap her anywhere and then tell me which team it is. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.